still early here.
It's
So
just late here.
you have a beeper.
I do indeed. I'm excited
Well,
to
that's good.
have a beeper. It's a little bit larger than I expected it to be, but I don't know why I had any idea in my head of what it was going to look like.
It's probably a little bit
But
older than
to have it,
it's probably a little bit older than you expected it to be. And
just a little bit, but it does the job, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't not in need of innovation.
yeah, it is. I think the third iteration of the beeper that I've used, but I've used these particular beepers for 20 years, maybe something like that.
Really.
Pretty long
What
time.
was the first? What did the first iteration look like?
Well, it looked more or less the same. They were all square boxes that you could buy on the, but the first box was both of the first two boxes were somewhat bigger.
Yeah.
But, so I've built these things, and so I can build. I only have built them out of the components that one can buy in what used to be
I see
stores.
your background is as an engineer, right? Is that correct?
Yes, I was an aeronautical
Yeah.
engineer in a previous lifetime.
Right. Yeah, cool. Very cool.
So I think that we've got basically three things that we need to talk about today, I guess. So as far as I know, one is the operation of the beeper. The next is what you're going to do, what the task of experience sampling is, and third, when we're going to do this again. And is there anything else that we should be talking about on this call?
No, I think nothing on my side.
Well, I don't have a choreography as to which one of these things we should do. Anybody got a preference as to where we should begin?
You're the expert, whatever
All
way,
right,
whatever way you want to do this.
well, let's do the beeper. Let's make sure we understand what the beeper is. So the beeper has on the top of it, on the end of it, two controls. It's got a thumb wheel that you can twist and a button that you can push. And the thumb wheel that you can twist should turn the thing on and off. So go ahead and turn that thing and see whether a beeper comes on. So Zoom is going to
I hear a
filter out
noise.
Zoom is going to filter out the beep, so we can't hear what you can hear. Zoom does an excellent job of canceling out the beep. So is it beeping now softly and if you push the
It
white
is indeed, yeah.
if you push the white button, that beep should stop.
That is exactly what happened.
All right. Now, if you push the white button again and hold the white button down, then it should give you a square wave beep. Beep, beep. Okay. Now, the purpose of that is the twofold. One is if you've got the beeper on for a while and you want to know whether it's still working, you can push that button and hold it down at any time. And if it gives you that kind of a square wave, then that means it's beeping. And the other thing that it can do is it can adjust the volume. So let's take a look at the earphone first. And so I sent you.
I'll switch out my.
You can keep one of those in, and
Let me.
I think I sent you the earphone as if you were going to wear it in your left ear, which I don't really care about that, but I think.
Yeah.
If you'd prefer to wear it in your right ear, we can switch the hook around. And the hook itself is a little bit flexible, so you can bend it around and make it somewhat secure.
Yeah.
Okay. And then let's plug the other end of that into the jack that's at the top of the. Yep. And now let's push the white button down and hold it down again, so you should be able to hear the square wave through the earphone. Same thing that you heard before, except now through the earphone. And now you can adjust the volume of that by twisting the thumb wheel. You have to hold the white button down while you do that.
I got it.
And the object is to make a beep which is loud enough so that there's no question about it. This is the beep, but not so loud that it startles you. And you will discover that it depends on where you are. I wouldn't have to do that. If you're in the library, then you need to have the beep relatively soft. If you're in your car, you need to have the beep relatively loud. And you can always adjust the beep by pushing down the white button and twisting the wheel until it gets to be comfortable.
In the wheel. Got it.
Okay. So that's the basics of the beep, the way the beeper works. So when the beeper has decided now when it's going to beep, and it's going to beep sometime within the next hour. The beeps are randomly distributed. If the beeper decides when to beep, I don't decide when it's going to beep. You don't decide when it's going to beep. The beeper makes up its own mind about that.
Okay.
But it does that from a uniform distribution that goes from a very short amount of time, a second or two, up to 1 hour. So you got a 50-50 chance of having an interval that's longer than a half an hour and a 50-50 chance that's shorter than a half an hour. And it could be a minute from now, and it could be 59 minutes from now. The beeper's going to decide. And when it beeps, it's going to beep that same beep that you're hearing on the square wave, except that beep is going to continue on like it did when you first turned it on. When it starts to beep, it'll continue to beep for a pretty long time, like half a minute or something.
Okay.
So your task is to wear the beeper into your natural environments, doing whatever it is that you would naturally do, and turn it on, I guess, and wear it into your natural environments using the earphone. The earphone, the onboard speaker isn't good enough. The onboard speaker is okay for instructional purpose, like we just did, and it's okay to make sure that the thing is working or whatever. But in order for the descriptive experience sampling to work, we have to have a beep that's really clearly defined and it's like injected into your ear. And if you've got the beeper using the onboard speaker and it's sitting over there on your desk somewhere and it starts to beep and you say, is that the beep? Is that the beep? Is that the beep? Oh yeah, that's the beep. Well, by then you will have lost what was in your experience. So your object is to put the beeper on, put the earphone in your, or turn the beeper on, put the earphone in your ear, and then go about your everyday business. And then when it beeps, your task is to freeze what we call freeze. It isn't really freezing, but in the ballpark of freezing, what your experience was ongoing just before the beep began. And by just before the beep began, I mean 1 microsecond before the beep began. I don't mean a minute before the beep began or 5 minutes or an hour or whatever. I mean, what I really mean is caught in flight by the beep.
Yes.
So I've got a lot of terms that I could use for that. We could call it just before the beep begins, or we could call it a microsecond before the beep begins, or a millisecond before the beep begins, or the last undisturbed moment before the beep begins, or caught in flight by the beep. All those things mean the same thing. I generally call all of those things the moment of the beep. So the moment of the beep is the last undisturbed moment just before the beep.
Okay.
And all those things are approximations. There is no such thing as a last undisturbed moment before the beep, because the beep happens and you got to rewind your consciousness, or whatever that means, to freeze whatever that means, whatever was in your experience, whatever that means at the moment of the beep. So it's all imperfect, but most people, not everybody, but most people find it possible to hear the beep precisely and to say, well, what I really wanted to know was what was going on in my experience before the beep got me.
Yeah.
So I don't want to know something like, well, I was startled by the beep. Well, the startle clearly came after the beep, right? And we don't want to know what you usually do or what your experience usually is, really. We're interested in what that particular experience is, whether it's typical of what you usually do or atypical, or doesn't really matter. We're interested in just that one thing.
Gotcha.
So the sampling task is to find a time, figure out a time where you can plan to wear the beeper for 3 or 4 hours. And 3 or 4, there's nothing magic about 3 or 4 hours. It's 3 or 4 hours is what it takes to talk about a half a dozen beeps. So what I want you to do is to get a half a dozen, like 6 beeps, 6 samples of your experience.
Okay. And a section of that was going to be my concern. Is this going to be buzzing when I'm in a podcast on quantum mechanics, and then I have to, like, I can schedule this around my podcast so that it's not disturbing those conversations?
Well, that's so you've got control over that. And
Yes.
and what I would say about that is while you're learning how to do it, you probably don't want to do it while you're in a podcast. But after you've got a few number of days on this under your belt of what sampling is like, and you got the mechanics figured out, ironed out, then you might want to know what's going on with you when you're having a podcast about quantum mechanics. And so you could arrange with the guy that's having when I'm in the middle of this experiment, I said, all right, with you, if I got this beep going on, and if it happens, then I'm going to have to interrupt for 15 seconds and then come back to the podcast. If that's all right with you, we'll do it. So you can.
It's actually an interesting point. It's fair. I might try it once or twice. I just for interest, I think, and it does feed into the content and it makes sense. So I don't think that's a terrible idea. I just wouldn't want it always going off during every podcast, if you know what I mean. But trying it once or twice, that's not a bad idea at all.
So what I think you will find is that the doing of it is not particularly intrusive once you figure it out. After a couple of days of sampling, you'll put the beeper in and you'll go about doing your everyday life. And when it beeps, you'll pay attention to what was going on. You'll stop. So the sequence is the thing beeps, you freeze what's inside your experience. You stop the beep by pushing the white button. And then you jot down some notes about your experience in the notebook. I sent you a notebook, I think.
I have a notebook. Yeah, okay. I record everything in my own sort of notebook here, which kind of goes everywhere. So I might, depending on if I'm heading out or I might switch between or.
Totally fine with me. I don't have a preference as to how you take notes about it. The notes are between you and you rather than between you and us. And by that I mean I want you to write down whatever it takes for you to be able to answer questions about what was going on in your experience. And if that's one word, that's fine. And if it's 5,000 words, well, that's fine. And if you want to draw a picture, that's fine. And if you want to record it on audio notes, that'd be okay as well. I don't really care about that. The object is to get at Evan's experience with as much fidelity as we can do. And the notebook is just a tool. The whole process is just a tool to get at that. So the only thing I really care about is that you get the beep through an earphone. That does make a difference to me. After that, I think Evan knows more about his life and his experience and what he's doing and whatever to know about the mechanics of how to do it. And I think he'll get better at it as he gets some practice at it. He won't be very good at it on the first day. He'll be better at it on the second day, better at it on the third day, whatever. That's built in to the process.
Yes. Does my experience in that moment include everything I see? I don't presume you want me to just list off the things in my visual experience, or do you? It'd be a good idea to clarify exactly what I should write down at that moment.
So I want you to write down whatever is what I call before the footlights of your consciousness, stealing from William James. So if what your eyeballs are aimed at is in your experience, what you're seeing is in your experience, then I would like you to take down some notes about that. But your eyeballs could be aimed at something and you're not thinking about it at all because you're actually thinking about what to ask this guy in the next podcast about quantum mechanics. And your eyeballs are aimed at the picture on your wall, but you don't really care about the picture at your wall at the moment. You care about what he might say about quantum mechanics. Then I want you to write down about what you were thinking about quantum mechanics. And I don't have a favorite modality. What I think your question is, does Russ want Evan to provide a catalog of all of his sensory inputs? And the answer is no. I think that's not possible because if we start down that road, we got visual sensory, and then we got what's coming out of your butt on the chair, and we got what's coming out of your feet, and we got the sound of the air conditioner, and we've got a semi-infinite list of possibilities. And it could be that Evan is experiencing, that is before the footlights of his consciousness, doing that for all of those things. So it could be that Evan would be seeing the picture on his wall and feeling his butt on the chair and thinking about the podcast that he's got coming up and hearing the air conditioner and all that stuff before the footlights of his consciousness, all simultaneous at the moment of the beep. If that's the case, well, then that's what I'd like to know about. But it's also possible that Evan will have filtered out, you might say, some of those things, or not made us, not what I would really say, not made experiential, some of those things. Obviously, he's responding to all of those things. And by responding, I mean his bag of bones is processing the edge of his chair because he doesn't fall off the chair, even though at any particular moment he's not really making that a part of his directly apprehended experience.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
So the short answer to that is not a list, but only what you have, what Evan's apparatus, whatever that is. I don't have a theory about how that apparatus works, but whatever it is, he has made present to him at the moment. And we'll find out what that is. And the second thing is, I expect that this conversation will not be adequate. So on the first day, we will have some, you will give an attempt, you will make some attempt, and this is what I thought, and we'll have a conversation about that. And you'll have some more questions, and I'll ask some questions, and Gualtiero will ask some questions, and you'll say, I don't know, I didn't really pay attention to that. And that's the way the process works. The process assumes that none of us are going to be very good at it on the first day. Evan has never done it before. Russ has never done it with Evan before. And Gualtiero has never been on the interview side before. And so we all are what I would metaphorically call wading into the waters sort of together, trying to figure out how to talk to each other about Evan's experience. And none of us are going to be very good at it on the first day. And we're going to find out some things on the first day that might make it easier for us on the second day. And then we might find out some things on the second day that might make it easier for us on the third day, et cetera. Or not. It could be that this process just doesn't work for Evan and he's worse at it on the second day than he was on the first or whatever. That would be interesting as well. So I don't want to rule out that possibility. That process, what I have been describing, I call the iterative process. If you're a mathematician type, or you know what iteration is, you want to find out what the value of a function is at when x is equal to 10. You make a guess at x equal 10, and you calculate it, and then it turns out not to be the right answer. So then you feed that information back into your equation and estimate it again, and do that again until your estimates have settled down. That's the mathematician's iteration, and that's the model that I think is appropriate here. We're going to ask some questions. You're going to be off the track. The questions are going to be off the track. Tomorrow we're going to be a little bit better at it, and we'll get closer to the track on both sides.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So what we're interested in.
It's beeping.
Okay. So if that had been a beep, your task would have been to freeze whatever was going on with you, then press the button, and then jot down some notes about it.
Okay. Do you want me to do that?
Sure.
Okay. Good. All right. Russell was filling me with the lack of confidence of how bad I'll be at this.
Okay.
And I think I was thinking that in words.
Okay. And then Russ would ask, well, what were those words? If they were in words, what were they?
Thinking that I'm going to be bad at this. So I believe in that moment, in my experience, I was aware of both of your faces, and I was kind of aware of the fact that you both have, or it looked like behind you was also some sort of depiction of the world, Russell, which I thought was interesting, but it's not that. And behind Gualtiero is a globe, and both of those things I think were in my experience, and I was sort of moderately thinking that painting looks the same as the globe.
Okay. All right. And you said something about that being in words. Was that in words?
I don't know.
Okay. So I don't really care whether things are in words. You said it was in words, and so I want to know whether you meant that literally or whether you meant that figuratively. And what I would point out about that example is that your experience is, I guess you could say, unpredictable. It's not tied to. I was carrying on about the iterative method or something like that, and you were thinking about worlds somehow. So your experience is not directly tied to what's going on in the external world. And what that means is that go for it, Gualtier.
So Evan shifted. First he said Russell was going on about how I'm not going to be good at this, which is true. You were, or at least a little prior. But of course the question is that what was in Evan's experience? And, the question for you, Evan, is that what you were experiencing at that moment? And you said it was in words, so it made it sound like you were thinking about that. But then later you said, you had this visual awareness of our faces and the globe and the comparison with the picture behind Russ. And of course it's compatible. You could have both in your experience. You could have both like a visual experience and a comparison between the globe and the paint and the picture behind Russell, and a thought about Russell telling you that you're not going to be good at this. But still, the question would be, are all of those in your experience at that moment, or you just know that Russell had been telling you these things, but what was in experience at the moment of the beep or right before the beep was this visual comparison of the globe and the picture and the faces and all that. So that would be
right.
Also, there's a question, but there's also a little maybe clarification of what we're looking for.
Right. No, it's a good point. I would say that the realization that I had about the globe and the painting probably happened a good bit before the beep. But then when I was called upon to recall the experience, it all kind of came through as I was kind of looking for an experience that I had. And I was kind of looking backwards in time to see what the experience was. And it was quite hard to look back as far as just before the beep and know further back. Was a challenging thing, I think.
So I agree with everything that Gualtiero said, and I think it does illustrate the complexity of the task.
For sure.
But I would also say, I also wish to emphasize that the particular task that you did right now is a terrible DES task, and the reason for that is that the beep that sounded in your ear at that particular moment, 9:23 or 6:23 your time or whatever that beep was, that beep did not mean for you at that moment, pay attention to my experience right now. That beep meant, well, maybe I'm supposed to be paying attention to that. Maybe I'm supposed to be, well, I'm not even sure, is that the beep? Is that really the beep? They got a whole constellation of stuff that makes that a really crappy DES beep. And so Gualtiero is 100% right that we want to distinguish between sort of the context. Well, Russ was telling me this, I'm going to be bad at this, and the specific about, well, I was comparing the globe to the picture. We are going to be interested in that. But, and it might very well be difficult, or it might be easy, but the purpose of this lecture is to say, we got to get you to the place where the beep means one and only one thing, and you're not there yet. And you can't possibly be there until we have sample for a couple of days. That's just part of the iterative process, is the recognition that the beep does not mean unambiguously, pay attention to my experience now, because, well, we don't know. We haven't learned how to respond to the beep, and we haven't learned how to figure out what experience is, and we haven't learned out what Russ is going to say, and we haven't learned what Gualtiero is going to say, and we haven't learned what the options are for me, and we don't know any of that stuff yet. And that's just the way it is. And as far as I can tell, there's no shortcut to that. That is, we just have to accept that none of us are going to be, that it's not possible for any of us to be good at this for a while. And we might get good at it, we might not get good at it. That remains to be seen. But for pretty sure, we're not going to be good at it on the first day.
I think I'm realizing it's going to be harder than I even previously imagined.
Well, that's good. But it also might turn out to be easier than you had previously imagined, because so far you haven't done it yet. So,
yeah.
So what I would like us to be open to the possibility that it's going to be harder, and open to the possibility that it's going to be easier. It's going to be what it's going to be, and we don't know yet. And we're going to find out about that.
Absolutely.
And we're not trying to be perfect at it. We're trying to just get some useful information. And I'd say that can be done. Even if we don't feel like ever that we are capturing exactly all and only the aspects of the experience that Evan had right before the beep, which I don't think is really feasible.
Neither do I. We are never going to be perfect in it. And we're never going to find, you said in your email, Evan, we're going to get at the deepest of Evan or something like that. That's not really true, actually. We're going to get at the most surface of Evan. We're going to get at whatever for whatever reason, interesting or not, global in picture or not, whatever he happens to be interested in a particular moment. And we're not going to get to the essence of Evan or the deepest of his thoughts. He may learn something about himself that he never knew before. That's pretty likely, probably, but it's an imperfect tool about probably an imperfect thing, and yet
makes sense.
Probably useful in some way.
Can I clarify something around the 3 or 4 hours per day that you want me to wear this? Does that mean that this won't be, just to clarify, so when I'm starting my 4-hour session of wearing this for the day, do I initiate by pressing the button and then it beeps for the time after that period? Or will it just be beeping throughout the day? And to clarify on that.
So presumably the beeper has been in your drawer, and now you're deciding, well, I'm going to wear the beeper now. So you get the beeper out of the drawer. When you turn it on, it will come on beeping, just like it did when you turn it. It'll come on beeping, and then you'll stop the beep by pushing the white button.
Yeah.
And at the moment that you do that, the moment you push that button, it will decide when it's going to beep again. It will know when that beep is going to happen, and it'll be any time between a few seconds and 59 minutes from now. And the beeper knows, but you don't know, and I don't know, and Gualtiero doesn't know.
Gotcha. And then I turn it off after a few hours.
And then, so what the few hours is basically, we want you to get about 6 beeps.
Okay.
That's the goal. It's not really 3 or 4 hours, it's 6 beeps. Because we've found...
And that only happens once a week. It's not every day. You only do this about once a week, depending on how often we want to do the interviews.
Would you agree with that? You want to do it only once? So I only wear it once per week?
Close, I would agree with that. What I want us to do is to decide when we're going to do this next. And for the sake of argument, let's say we decide to do this a week from today at the same time, which would be Friday the 11th or something like that. Let's say we decided that. Yeah. Then we want you to wear the beeper in the 24 hours-ish before Friday the 11th. So sometime on Thursday during the day or Friday during the day, we would like you to wear the beeper and get us 6 beeps.
Gotcha. That clarified a lot.
And those are the only beeps that we're particularly interested in. And that's what Gualtiero was saying. What I would expand a little bit about what Gualtiero was saying is, if in the meantime you want to wear the beeper and try it out and see what how it sounds and where you're gonna clip the beeper, and some people find that it's a good idea to wear the earphone down inside their shirt, wear the cable inside your shirt, because then it doesn't snag on the doorknob, and the cable will, your shirt collar will keep the cable up against your neck and make the whole thing feel secure. A lot of people think that's good, but you got to figure that out. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just saying there's some mechanics involved. And if you want to play around with the beeper between now and then, that's fine with me.
I probably will.
But the beeps and the logic there is, I want to tell us, I want us to tell Gualtiero very little about what to do in his life. He should do whatever the fuck he wants to do in his life. Except when it comes to the 6 beeps that we're going to talk about, those we would like to be fresh, which means within about 24 hours of when we're going to talk about them.
That clarified a lot. I was kind of thinking that I had made a big mistake with this because I thought you were telling me to wear this basically every second of my life for the next 6 weeks. And I was thinking, oh God, this is going to really disrupt my work. But that's much better than this.
So you're going to pick a window, pick a
Yes.
3 or 4 hour window when you can wear the beeper. And we don't want that to be a special window. We don't want you to set aside, well, I can wear this the next 3 or 4 hours. I can just sit around waiting for the beep. That would not be good. We want you to be wearing the beeper, doing whatever it is that you would be doing, preparing for a podcast, going to the grocery store, doing a podcast, working out at the gym, whatever you would normally do in those times.
Yeah.
And then we're going to find out.
Try and get some, you said maybe try and get some varied experiences over the weeks. So maybe make a little bit of a conscious effort if there isn't. Also, I'd be very interested in this for myself, going for a walk. If I don't want to be at my desk for every single beep, go for a walk, go to the gym, try and vary the experiences up a little bit.
I think that I do agree with that.
Gotcha.
And I think that will naturally occur if you've got a lot of beeps while you're at your desk and you sort of know what's going on while you're at your desk, then you will naturally think, well, I wonder whether this is the way I am at other times. And
yeah.
So then you wear the
We'll
beeper.
see how easy this thing is to run with. I mentioned I was running a lot. We'll see how if it's easy to run with. I'll give it a try. I don't know where I would clip it onto for running, or
It has a clip. It has a clip.
Yeah.
And so you can clip it.
It might go into the shorts easily enough, yeah.
Or you can carry it in your hand, or you could tape it to your arm, or tape it to your shirt, or it's pretty robust, other than it doesn't want to get wet. So I wouldn't wear it swimming or taking a bath.
I won't go. That's what I was gonna say. I won't go. I do some open water swimming as well.
Yeah,
I won't go open water swimming with it.
That would not be good. And, but other than that, it's pretty good. The earphone is it's got really thin wires in it, so you can break the earphone wires. But you can use a different. There's nothing magic about that earphone. You can use an earphone of your own preference if you like, as long as it's got an 8-inch jack in it that'll fit into that slot, and you can test. Yeah. You can test it out. What it does with your own earphone, if you prefer to use your own earbud, whatever.
I don't think I've owned a headphone in a while with a wire, if I'm honest.
It's a long story there, but I'd obviously prefer not to have a wire in this apparatus, but it turns out to be quite difficult to deliver a good beep through a wireless earphone.
Interesting. I was gonna say that if you could actually allow, like I have these running headphones that I really like, you would be mirroring my actual experience a little bit more if it were possible to be compatible, right? But I understand.
Yeah, I haven't played around recently. I think there probably are 8-inch jack to Bluetooth converters, which I haven't tried. But you could probably plug a Bluetooth, if you had one, plug a Bluetooth creator into the jack, and then see how the system responds. But the problem, the reason that's difficult is that the Bluetooth protocol, the last time I looked at it anyway, last time I tried to figure it out, the Bluetooth protocol is always trying to decide whether something is going on. So there's like a voice actuation kind of a deal in there. And so there is circuitry in Bluetooth that is trying to decide whether the sender is sending something to me.
Right.
And that takes a while for it to figure out. And so that when it happens, it doesn't give you a crisp beep, which is what I need. It gives you a sort of a beep, and that's not good enough. But,
makes sense.
But I haven't tried it recently, and you might be more technically savvy than I am about that. So there might be a way to figure that out. But what we do need, I'm pretty sure what we do need, is a beep that has a sudden rise time. Like there's nothing, and then there's something. Very much like when you hold the white button down now, you push the white button down, that's a square wave, which is really quite square. There's nothing, and then there's something, and then
yeah,
that's the nature of a good beep. So, for example, when you first turned the beeper on, it came on with a sort of a whoop sound. That would not be good enough. But that's the only time you'll hear that is when you first turn it on. It has to fill up its capacitors, and it takes a while for it to do that. But once it's got its capacitors full, then every beep after that is going to have a crisp leading edge to it.
Right.
And that turns out to be necessary. We gotta what I think of as necessary. It has to be no beep, no beep, no beep, beep, without any ambiguity there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for just the reasons that we were talking about, if the beep comes on with a half a second whoop to it, well, experientially, a lot can happen in a half a second. And we're trying to eliminate that as much as we can.
Makes sense. No, that clarifies a lot. I think I have a good idea of getting my beeps in for the week.
And the interviews, they're going to be simple in the sense that we're going to pick a time, we're going to get together, and I will probably say, well, Evan, what was in your experience at the moment of the first beep? And then you will tell me, and then I'll ask some questions about that, and Gualtiero will ask some questions about that. And it'll be a tag team interview where Gualtiero and I are asking whatever questions occur to us to ask. And then on the second beep, Gualtiero and I haven't yet figured that out, but it could be that we'll alternate back and forth, and Gualtiero can ask about the second beep, and I'll be the tag team center fielder or shortstop or whatever, and we can alternate back and forth. Or Gualtiero might think for the first while at this that Russ should do the interviewing and he should be the shortstop. That's sort of up to Gualtiero. He can figure out how comfortable he is in whichever role he wants to have. I don't know what the best thing to do there is. But the point that I'm trying to say is that the object is going to be to ask you about your first beep, what was in the experience at the moment of, which means 1 microsecond before, which means the last undisturbed moment, which means what was going on with Gualtiero in some parallel universe that didn't have a beeper in it, but at the same time, that's really what we're looking for.
Yes. When you do this with other people, do you go through in a lot of detail the type of experiences that people generally have, or do you kind of leave that a bit ambiguous on purpose? Because I'm kind of very aware now that, my elbow is touching the desk, and as you say, like my foot is on the chair, and I'm trying to, really understand the experiences. So when the beep happens, I have some clarification of what to be aware of.
So I don't tell you what to be aware of on purpose. So I'm purposefully ambiguous because I think, as you say, Evan is perfectly capable of noticing the elbow on the chair. And my guess is that when he's noticing the elbow on the chair, he's not noticing the connection between my picture and Gualtiero's world, but maybe he is. So I don't want to say he is or he's not. What I think is that let's leave it at that Evan will create some experience for himself. And that may be one thing at a time. I'm paying attention to my elbow on my chair. and then I'm paying attention to my foot on the floor, and then I'm paying attention to the gravelness of Russ's voice, and then I'm paying attention to Gualtiero scratching his head, and all that thing. Those could be one at a time sequentially, or it could be that I am experientializing all of those things at the same time. That's possible. And I wish purposefully to be evasive about that. And it's not because I want to make the task hard for you, but it is, I don't want to tell you what I expect, because A, I don't know what to expect. And B, if I did know what to expect, I wouldn't tell you, because I don't want you to go looking. I don't want you to go looking for what you think Russ wants to find.
Yeah, makes complete sense. I'm just getting all the stupid questions out of my mind now that come to my mind before we start.
So everything, I think every word that I have said today, and probably for quite some time in my lifetime, is aimed at being interested in what happens in Evan's experience if he wasn't wearing a beeper. But if Russ could somehow get some glimpses into Evan's experience without wearing a beeper, what would he see? What would he feel? What would be going on with Evan? And Russ finds that to be an interesting. Finds that to be interesting, I guess. Leave it at that. And he will do whatever he thinks he has to do in order to help Evan tell him about that. And if that means that Russ has to stand on his head in the corner so that Evan can feel comfortable talking to him, well, then Russ will stand on his head in the corner. He doesn't expect to have to do that, but what he expects to do is to try to figure out what he can do, what Russ can do, to let Evan get in a position where he wants to tell Russ about what's in his experience. Actually, much of what we've been talking about today is Russ's way of trying to convey to Evan that it would be interesting to tell Russ and Gualtiero about what's going on in his experience, and to do it right. Everything that I have said today is as much about that as about the mechanics.
That's clear.
And I'm now reacting to your statement a minute ago about trying to get all the stupid questions out. I'm guessing there will be more stupid questions, and A, they're not stupid, and B, you should feel free to ask them, and they will happen on the first sampling day, and sooner or later you'll get your questions answered. And when they're answered, then they won't occur to you to ask them anymore. But until that time, you should ask them.
Will do.
Because what we don't want is for what you would worry about being a stupid question or whatever, get in the way of your telling us about what Evan's experience is like.
I've never let a stupid question get in the way before, so don't worry about that.
That's good. And I also am reminded that in some email or other, you said you sometimes smoke weed, and you'd be interested in what your experience was like that. And I've got nothing against that. I might suggest not doing it on the first day, but so if you want to find out what your experience is like when you're smoking dope, that's fine with me. That's the kind of thing that I don't have control over, and so I don't pretend to try to have control over it. But what I would say is, if you want to know about that, it'd probably be a good idea to figure out the mechanics of how to do it.
Absolutely.
How to wear the beeper before you try some special thing.
Yes. Yeah. Otherwise, you'll end up with a 60-page novel of my experience on day one. We'll cover the basics first.
We would see.
Yeah. No, that's all clear.
And so Gualtiero should feel free to say whatever he wants to say whenever he wants to say it. And he should ask whatever he wants to ask. And I guess I should say a few things about the rules of the questions. So first, the fundamentalist rule is that Evan's experience is Evan's private property. And he has no obligation to tell anybody about anything about that period, including maybe including especially Russ and Gualtiero. So if he doesn't want to tell us about his experiences, he should just say, I don't want to tell you about that. And I've got stuff that's none of your business. I presume you got stuff that's none of my business. That's just the way the world is. But if he's going to talk about a beep, then it's easiest for all concerned if Russ and Gualtiero can then ask about his experience, whatever they want to ask. So if there's some aspect about an experience that you don't want to talk about, it's probably just easier to say, let's not talk about this beep because I'm going to hide something. And then Russ isn't going to be satisfied that he's got the full question. He's going to probe and probe and probe and probe around this, and I'm going to have to defend against that. It's just easier if we skip that. So you should always feel free to say none of your business. And you should also feel free to say, I changed my mind about this whole thing, but now that I know what experience sampling is like, I don't want to have any part of it. You should feel free to exercise that option without our holding it against you. And we have talked about the possibility of putting this stuff on the web, which is its own deal. And Evan should have, well, I think we all should have 51% of the vote, but Evan particularly should have 51% of the vote about whether that ever happens. So whatever Evan says belongs to the three of us until such time as Evan says we can be more public about that. So yeah. From my own point of view, I think what I say belongs to Evan, so he should be able to do with that whatever it is that he wants to do with that whenever he wants to do it. But it's not symmetric. I don't have the right to do with Evan's experience whatever I want until such time as Evan says. And the reason for the reason for that is that the private nature of Evan's experience belongs to Evan, and he should feel like he has control. He should A, have control, and B, he should feel like he has control over the dissemination of that.
I do, and I appreciate that.
But for me, what I'm saying is, I'm saying you should be able to say to anybody anytime, well, this is what Russ asked me, or this is what he said about that, or whatever. Because you should be able to ask your friends or whatever about whether that's a good idea for you to participate or whatever. And so you should, what I say is more or less fair game. I'd presume that you should take my feelings into consideration or whatever, but it's not the same level of consideration as with Evan.
I understand that, and I appreciate that. Anything else you think we need to go through?
So let me tell you a couple more things about the beeper. If you turn the beeper off with the thumb wheel, turn the beeper off.
So turn back the wheel.
Yeah. And you can tell whether it's off by holding down the white button, and if it doesn't make a square wave, then it's off.
There's a click on the wheel. Okay, I was pushing it to one. It clicks off. Gotcha.
Okay, yeah, so it's now off. So now what I want you to do is to hold down the white button, hold the white button down and keep it down, and turn it back on. So with your other hand, use the thumb wheel to turn it back on.
It goes into crazy mode.
And it should have played you a little song that goes dee 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 dee, whatever.
Yes.
That's a song that the beeper plays to me so that I know what's happening inside the box. You don't need to worry about that. I'm just telling you, if you hear that song, don't worry about it. Just stop holding the white button down, and that sound will go away. Now, so you're back. You're back into the normal operation. There are switches inside the box that allow me to program the box to be either fixed intervals or random intervals or how long the intervals are or whatever. And so that I don't have to take the box apart to look at the switches, I've programmed it so that it sings the switch pattern to me. And so
makes sense.
But you don't need to
try the sampling out with fixed intervals versus variable intervals, and I'm curious if you found different things from that. I can see why a fixed interval could distort the results to some extent if you think you know when the beep is coming and you start expecting it.
Yeah. I have never done a particular study about that. I'm a great believer in randomness, and randomness requires random intervals. So when I built the box, I put the option in on some if I was ever interested in a fixed interval, which so far I never have been, but
never have.
but I built that as an option.
Yeah, makes sense.
I probably had an extra switch, and I figured, well, what am I going to do with this switch? Well, I'll make it either fixed or, there's a bank of switches in there, like 8 switches come when you buy a bank of switches. They've got 8 switches. 6 of them have to do with how long the interval is, and one of them is whether it's fixed or random, and the other one is something else.
Cool.
And the other thing that you should know about the beeper is that when you're done with the beeper for the day, you've gotten your 6 beeps. You should turn the beeper off by rolling the thumb wheel and clicking it off. But if for some reason you forget to do that, it'll beep. Sooner or later, it will beep. And that beep is going to last for a while. I don't remember exactly how long that is, maybe 45 seconds. I think maybe I sent that in an email to Gualtier a while back, but some half a minute or 45 seconds or something like that is going to give you that beep for a while, and then it's going to stop beeping because it doesn't want to waste its batteries by beeping. The beeper doesn't require much power except while it's beeping. So after 45 seconds, it's going to stop the beep, and then it will go into what I call the chirp mode. And about every 15 seconds, it's going to go chirp, and then 15 seconds later, it's going to go chirp, and then 15 seconds later, it's going to go chirp, more or less like a fire alarm, smoke alarm when the battery is going low. You know what that sound is like? It's going to sound sort of like that. And what that means is I beeped. Evan didn't stop my beep, and so I'm going to save my battery and I'm going to chirp. That is not the beep. That is the chirp. So
makes sense.
The beep that you're interested in is the long, steady beep that we've been talking about. So if you hear the chirp mode, then turn me off, and then turn me back on again, and then I'll come back on beeping and stop the beep, and then we're back in business again. So you probably will never hear the chirp mode, but if it's the middle of the night somewhere and you hear some chirp, what the heck is that? Chirp, what the heck is that? Well, that means you didn't turn me off fully.
I didn't turn it off, right?
So I think that's the deal. Gualtier, you have anything more to say?
I have nothing more to say.
Well, these exercises are all interesting because we all have sort of different levels of interest here, different reasons for being here. And they're going to come together at the moments of Evan's beeps, and then we may have conversations about them. And in the conversation, I guess I should say, so my plan, roughly speaking, is to prepare a transcript of all of the interviews that we do, with the aim of sooner or later we'll put those on the web, and it's a lot easier to have done the transcripts along the way. And I will write comments into those transcripts. I don't know whether you've looked at the transcripts that I've got out on the web already. Have you seen my website where
I did see the website once, and then I actually struggled to find your website again. If you wouldn't mind sending it to me in an email,
okay,
just so I could have another look at your website.
Yeah, every email that I have sent you has in it my website, and there are a bunch of links in there, including something that says something like complete set of DES interviews or something like that. But I will remind you in an email about what that is, and so I'll write comments in there, and the comments that I write. So I want to tell you what the comments are. The comments would be aimed at somebody that I would think might be interested. If these things get out there, somebody's listening to them or following along in the transcript. What might somebody be interested in? And I might write a comment, and that comment could be aimed at Evan, or it could be aimed at Gualtiero, or it could be aimed at some other person in my imagination that might be interested in what's going on here. And I might be trying to explain, well, why is it that I asked Evan that question? And how did I understand what Evan said when he said that question or whatever? And Gualtiero should feel free to write comments as well and respond to the comments that I say or whatever. And so there could be a back and forth about those comments. And Evan can be a free agent in how he deals with that. And he's got basically two choices. One is he could say, I'm not going to look at these transcripts and comments because I want to have more or less a standard DES experience that would not include that. Or he might think, well, this isn't the standard thing in the first place. The whole thing is different. I want to know what Russ is saying or what Gualtiero is saying. And I might have a response to that, and I'd rather do it today than wait until 6 months from now and go back and look at it. So that's, you can deal with that however you want to do with it. Which is another way of saying, I'm interested in your experience at the moment of the beep. After that, I don't much care what you do and what you don't do. And I don't think it actually much matters whether, to the extent that you are scientifically interested or whatever into your experience. I think you can lie to us and make up stuff, and if you're good at it, you can probably pull the wool over our eyes, and there's nothing I can do about that. And I might suspect that, or might not. You might be, depending on how skilled you were. So I think that's always a possibility. But other than that, I think it probably doesn't much matter what you do in between times, as long as in the 3-hour window you're wearing the earphone, and in the interview you're trying to tell us what happened when you were wearing the earphone.
Got it. In the 6 beeps, if I'm just have another question that came to mind. Should I be trying to judge if I thought I was able to get a good experience on that beep, and then if I'm looking back over it, I'd be like, okay, maybe that one I'm unconfident on. Maybe I should get another beep, or should I just let you decide?
I think you should let me decide. You should try to do the best you can. You should, and if you think that you have a trouble on a particular beep, you should say, well, I'm not sure that I really got this particular beep, and then we can talk about why that is.
Okay. And
then between the 3 of us, we can decide whether you should skip that kind of a beep in the future, or whether we should just try to nail that down. What I would say about it is that your perspective on your own beeps is probably quite different from anybody else's perspective on those. And what you think is difficult, the rest of us might find not difficult, and what you think is interesting, the rest of us might find boring, and what you think is boring, the rest of us might find interesting. And so I would say, trying to tell us about what was going on at the moment of the beep, and the rest of that stuff, we'll figure it out as we go.
Got it. Now, that was the last kind of thing that came to mind. I think I'm clear on everything.
Then the next question is when we're going to do this again.
Friday works for me, if it works for you.
So that more or less up to Gualtiero, I think.
Yeah, I think Friday, unless we want to do this over the weekends, which would be fine with me because I don't really distinguish weekends from non-weekends in my schedule. Friday's the next day that I would be available, because from Monday to Thursday I'm going to be traveling too much and too much going on.
So we could think of meeting again at this same time on Friday, which for Gualtiero would now be in Italy or someplace.
Yeah, I'll still be a little jet lagged, but I should be okay.
So that would be then 6 o'clock in the evening for Gualtiero and Evan, and 9 o'clock in the morning for me on Friday the 11th.
Yeah. I think that makes sense, because I have podcasts Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I want to try and that means I have Thursday free on my first attempt at getting good beeps. I don't want to throw in any hurdles on my first beeps,
Okay.
trying to practice. So I think trying to do 24 hours on Thursday makes more sense.
So you can wear the beeper for us, get your 6 beeps either on Thursday the 10th or Friday the 11th.
Yeah. Okay.
And we say 24 hours, but I don't actually mean 24 hours. 24 hours would mean it would have to start at 6 o'clock in the evening on Thursday, but that's not really what I think. What I really think is one sleep cycle. So you can wear it anytime on Thursday or anytime on Friday, presuming that you sleep on Thursday night. Anytime on Thursday or Friday is fine with me.
Yeah. Perfect.
What we have found, and this is pretty anecdotal from my point of view, is that sleeping on a beep for twice, people seem to have difficulty remembering the details of their beep if they slept on it twice. They can sleep on a beep once, it's sort of okay. The second time, that's my clinical impression, I guess you could say, my retrospective account. So
yeah.
Anytime on Thursday, wear the beeper for as long as it takes to get 3 hours, to get 6 beeps, which is going to be on the order of 3 hours. Might be 2 hours, might be 4 hours. Could be as many as 6 hours. Could be as little as 5 minutes.
Sounds good.
And I guess one more thing, and that is if a second beep comes really right after the first beep, just ignore that second beep.
Right. And do you think if I get overly startled, like I feel like the first time it beeped there, I kind of got quite startled by it. If I do get startled by it and I think that experience is just kind of tainted, should I just also ignore it? Like if I believe in that moment that I can't get that experience because it just took me away too much?
I would say maybe for the first beep or two, that would be fine. After that, if that's what happens, then we probably ought to talk about that.
I don't think it will happen. I'm just saying starting off. Okay,
that's the kind of thing that I don't think there's a right answer to that. If the beep always startles you, then the method probably isn't going to work. But
you can adjust the volume. That might help a little. If it might be too loud. There's a minimum volume, but
I don't think it will.
At the beginning, the minimum volume felt a little too loud to me, but after a couple of days, I kind of got used to it, and then I was fine.
Yeah, like I don't think it will. It's just that if it happens on the first couple of beeps, just as I get used to it.
Yeah. The whole in my usual work, I throw out the first day, so it's like the first day is all artifact from my point of view, or mostly artifact.
Yeah.
It's like wading into the water. Where the hard part about swimming or sailing, if you're a sailor, the hardest part about if you sail small boats, absolutely the hardest part of it is getting into the boat, and once you're in it and underway, then sailing is easy, but getting away from the shore is sort of the hard part. So that's sort of like the first day. We got to figure out how to get the boat in the water.
Right.
All right. So I will. My usual procedure is I will give us a calendar invite for the Friday the 11th at 9, and I will send us an email on Thursday the 10th reminding us that that's going to happen. And if in the meantime you've got questions, you should feel free to ask them. Send me an email or text me or whatever.
Will do.
I think I have your telephone number. Do you have my telephone number?
Possibly in the email before you did, but you seem quite fast at responding to emails. But yeah, we can do either.
Yeah, I'll send you. I think texts are often good on the day of. Like something happens, and I can't do it. That's very often easier to get a fast response out of a text. But I'll send you my text, my telephone number.
Sounds good.
Anything else?
Nothing from my side. Excited to get started.
All righty. I will see you a week from today.